All right. Hi, everyone. It's Clare Kumar back with you for another Work from Home Better interview. And today I'm thrilled to have Dave Byrnes with me. You might have seen the marketing for this talk coming up, and Dave had a bag over his head, and you might have wondered why. Well, Dave is also known as the Introverted Networker. So today we're going to be exploring the topic of introverts and extroverts, and what are the challenges working from home? Who does it better? So I'm really curious because Dave's been someone who's been focusing on helping introverts be more successful at work and also helping leaders better manage them to success. And this is coming after 20 years of not realizing he was introvert and struggling in his career. When he figured that out, he thought, boy, I have something to add to all the introverts out there and the leaders who are working with them to help them have a better experience. So I am very excited about this discussion. Dave Byrnes, welcome.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So one of the first things I wanted to understand is, what's your definition of an introvert? Is it someone who's shy, who likes things quiet? Well, how do you define introversion?
Yeah, I've broken it down into just a few things because there's a lot of confusion about the difference between being shy and introverted, having social anxiety and introversion, and often that confusion is also with introverts themselves. It's not just extroverts and people that aren't in that sort of personality frame. But really, a couple of things. What it comes down to is where you get your energy from, and this is a really important one, and it drives a lot of the behavior. So an introvert gets their energy from solitude and being by themselves, whereas an extrovert gets it from being around people. So an introvert can really enjoy socializing and really enjoy people, but the battery will drain at some stage. So that's where the solitude comes in, which is a tough thing right now that I'm sure we'll talk about with the situation we're in at the moment. Another one is basically it's the amount of stimulation that people can take. So noise, visuals, whatever kind of information is coming towards a person, introverts are a lot more sensitive to that and get overwhelmed more easily. And they've even done this with babies. They'll get a fairly young baby and they'll test out sort of what noise they and level of stimulation they can take, and what they got from those tests was right pretty much every single time.
Wow. So what you're suggesting, it's kind of wired in to the way we are, this tendency or preference, trait,
Yeah.
temperament. What is introversion, extroversion? Is it a trait, a temperament? Is there language around saying what it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think temperament is that I've never found a word that you couldn't pick a hole in. So
Right?
yeah,
Yeah.
what I've always looked at, especially when I'm talking to crowds who maybe aren't very familiar with it, is I look at introverts and extroverts as a filter. It's a way to understand other people. So you can everybody's on a different point on this scale, this spectrum, but it's more a way to understand people. So no personality test or personality characterization is actually perfect. So, and
Yeah, well, and it's part of Myers-Briggs, right? So the introversion, extroversion is the first letter in your four letter characterization through the Myers-Briggs test, right?
Yeah, I mean, Myers-Briggs has got so much popularity and a lot of clout. But once you really dig into it, it's still boxing people, even if Myers-Briggs has 16 boxes.
Yeah,
It's
complicated. Yeah.
Well, it's like astrology. Like I have a hard time thinking there's only 12 kinds of people. Introversion and extroversion is a character trait, and it's a hardwired one as well. It's not something that changes. You can get past shyness, but introversion, again, because it's more wired into where you get your energy from, that a tolerance for stimulation, and then there's a wiring in the brain, pretty much. So they've tracked the thought process between introverts and extroverts, and introverts take a longer path because we access different parts of our brain just because we think a little bit differently. But yeah, and then that comes out as, well, introverts are so quiet, like they never speak up. It's like, because I missed my chance because
there's a
I
lot
was,
going on.
yeah, like an introvert will think about things and have it pretty dialed in when they speak, especially in a more formal setting like a work meeting, things like that, or some social gathering where they're not as comfortable. Whereas an extrovert basically likes to think out loud, so
Yeah.
there's no real blockage. It's coming out there.
It's
So
a lack of filter. It could
to a
be.
point, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's where understanding comes in. Like an introvert needs to understand how an extrovert thinks, and vice versa,
I want to
because
get into that. But before
yeah.
I do, just to kind of help people understand the spectrum that's out there, can you help me understand what percentage of people are skewing more towards really identifying as introverts? How many people are extroverts? And then how many people are more like me, according to the test that I did, that said I'm slightly more extroverted, but I really have periods of time where I draw my energy from solitude. And other times when I'm talking to a crowd of people, and then I'm really juiced by that energy. So,
Mm.
so where do people fall? Is it a traditional bell curve, or what does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, there haven't been any really extensive ones where yeah, they can plot it, and the term ambivert, which is for people that have a balance that sit in the middle,
Mhm.
is rather new as well. A lot of people wouldn't know that. They might think that they're an introvert, but maybe they actually sit in the middle. So it's about a third of the population typically that would be identified as introverts. But again, that number kind of slides depending on who's doing the research. So again, um, yeah, yeah, about a third of people are.
Yeah.
They probably haven't done as much research on how many people are pure extroverts, because that's the norm, and that's where things have got skewed as well. Is because especially sort of the North American society, and it rewards extroverts. The last century, it's been more about having a big personality, than sort of previously. It was a little bit more like scholars were more revered. 100 years ago, it was
Mhm.
more about character, being humble and that kind of thing. But in the last century, as you know, we've expanded so much, we've connected, but also salespeople have become this huge part of life, customer service, all these new areas. So there might be plenty of people that might just believe that they're extroverts and maybe not very good at it, but they might be
Ah,
introverts.
so there could be a blindness to the fact that there could be greater comfort because our environment, you're right, it's really built around people who are comfortable, especially with the shift to open concept offices. You're more comfortable if you're extroverted because you can't escape the energy that's all around you. I want
Yeah.
to just, before we go deeper, I just want to say why I have a bit of a personal interest in it, and just to add a little nuance. So I talk about being a highly sensitive person. So this is a
Mm.
sensitivity processing. Processing sensitivity to stimulation. So that what you talked about there, it's interesting, and that's a nervous system wiring that you can't manage out of. You can build some resilience and you can control your world so that your stimulation is reduced and you can have a calmer existence. But 70% of highly sensitive people are introverts, and there's 30% that are more extroverted. So it's not, it also doesn't, paint, like you said, the boxes are maybe not so finite. There's nuance everywhere. And what does that look like? So
Yeah.
it's definitely part of the conversation. And in Susan Cain's book, Quiet, she
Yeah.
explores the high sensitivity in the book, which is largely more about introversion, but there's a good chunk of referencing Elaine Aron's work in there too. So quite interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah. So do you have any comments on that in your experience, or would you like to dive right into the challenges and opportunities of being introverted first before we talk about extroverts?
Yeah, I just add to what you were talking about. Yeah, those
Mhm.
numbers. Again, there's a lot of links between introversion and certain other characteristics. Highly sensitive people
Mhm.
can often be more there. What I talk about with the shyness, with social anxiety. But one interesting thing is I remember a discussion and talking about social anxiety and introvert and woe is me and how tough it is. And the point got raised, like imagine being an extrovert who gains their energy from people and needs relationships. Imagine it being socially anxious and being an extrovert. That would be far worse than an introvert because we're pretty good by ourselves. Like, and
Yeah.
we it's not that we don't need relationships, but we're more low key, we're more one-on-one. It would be quality time with one person or a small group rather than needing a bunch. But so again, what would it be like to be an extrovert and be highly sensitive? I don't know, but so everybody's
It's
got their
tricky, I'll tell
stuff.
you. It's
Everybody's
tricky.
got their stuff for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So can we dive now into what challenges introverts face, in a typical office environment? And then now that we're all at home, or a lot of us are at home, how has that shifted and how is, what's better, what's worse?
Yeah, and I'd break it down into probably two challenges in work. One would be the really the structure of how we set up jobs, roles and responsibilities, and that kind of thing. And again, uh, there are a lot of introverts that are doing jobs that exhaust them and have areas that really don't suit them. But
Mm-hmm.
you run into the that's how we've always done it piece. And yeah, as I said, there's hundreds of personality tests out there. I've done the red, green, blue. I've done Stephen Covey. I've done like a heap of different ones.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that work should throw everything out and just box us into introvert and extrovert.
Mm.
But it isn't really something that's been looked at, and it was never something that I really came across. Like I remember doing the colors model,
Mm-hmm.
and it breaks you down into four characteristics, and you should have two that are dominant.
Yeah.
And I was one of the weird people. Only two of us. I had three dominant characteristics in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that would have happened 5 years earlier. I think it's because I'd done a lot of work on my communication, my confidence, my all the personal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the other person that got it was a raging extrovert, and
Oh,
she comes up to me and
a
she's
raging extrovert. That's funny.
oh, absolutely. Like she was my polar opposite, but we worked together and she was younger, so she didn't quite get my quiet ways. But
Mm.
she came up to me and goes, "Oh my God, we're twins." And I'm like, "Yeah, right, we're
Yeah.
twins."
Mm.
So yeah, there's a grain of salt with every kind of personality test,
Yeah.
but yeah, like so introverts can struggle in meetings, and again, that comes back to that ability to sort of think fast and
Mm.
and contribute, and and introverts are a little bit more reserved.
Mm.
One way I got around that in my corporate years is I became the the rule keeper or the timekeeper of the meetings. So
Uh-huh.
people look to me to get them back on track. So I wasn't turning into a raging extrovert that spoke for the whole meeting, but I kind of had permission to interrupt my way senior boss and say, have we thought about this, or can we bring it back? So there's kind of roles and responsibilities if it's meetings or if you're in a workplace that has a lot of interruptions and things like that. Like I've worked at a newspaper in what they would call the bullpen. So
Oh.
there's just stuff going everywhere, and I used to listen to music to try to block out the buzz. And then
Mhm.
when my boss realized I was listening to music and I wasn't actually listening to my tape recorder, I got told I wasn't allowed to. And I was
Oh,
like, okay, well,
wow.
um, but yes,
So
I mean, there's
what was the consequence for you? Just to paint the, of working in that environment, first of all, and then being denied a coping strategy that you'd come up with. Can you talk just a little bit of that so people can understand
yeah,
what you were feeling and the impact to your personal performance?
yeah. uh, the one important thing is I didn't know about introverts or extroverts for another 10 years. So I just thought I was really bad at things. I just thought there was like seriously something wrong with me. Why I could ring up a politician and have no problems and talk to that person. Then you send me out to the street just to talk to regular people and interrupt them and try and get their photo and get a little quote for those questions that used to be in there. It was hell on earth for me. And some of that wasn't just introversion. It was probably some of my social anxiety and shyness and things like that. And those are things that I worked on, and they wouldn't be as big a problem. But that exhausted me. Like I dreaded it all
Mm,
day. And
mm,
then when I got back from doing it really poorly, and it was probably because I was so reticent to do it, so uh, you know, just didn't want to do it, and people could pick that up probably. Like
yeah.
so many people said, no, I don't want to do it, and it was probably my body language. But yeah, that one was a
Mm,
good
mm,
example, and it
mm.
was just tough. That's your job. So yeah, I almost left that job because of
Yeah.
that role for a while.
I
Um,
look at I look at some of the
mm,
challenge that I experience with the stimulation sensitivity, and I look at them as taxes through my day that are they're just eroding my energy, slowly eroding it. So by the time I would get back from a trip on a noisy, packed subway, a walk through a crowded, very a tough soundscape underground tunnel, the lack of light, working in an office with
mm,
potentially not great one-on-one in-depth conversations, which I tend to like as well.
yeah,
By the time I got home, I'd have to crawl into bed, especially in the winter when there was a real lack of light and energy. So
yeah,
managing energy, I look at these environments that we're not suited for as taxes. And so, one of my big initiatives as we move through this situation where we're now in, I don't know what week, probably 9, 10, something like that, of after COVID lockdown sort of hit North America. And we are starting to think about the return to work. One of my I think the time is now, and I've lobbied for it for about 20 plus years. Can we have work constructs which are designed for individuals? So work individualization, customized work, enter the onboarding discussion, and when does that become part of the, gosh, Dave, I love your genius and your great depth of interviewing skills with a politician. What environment, what do you need to be really successful? Because that's your greatest contribution. And how can we support you in that? And so, what I'm hoping now is that leaders are going to be paying attention to the different personality temperaments, sensory processing, introversion, extroversion, all of these invisible conditions, traits, preferences,
mm,
superpowers, but the way we need to sort of incubate and take care of our talent so that we invite the best from everybody. That's my big if there's one thing I want to do, that's my desire to work with leaders to incubate this and cultivate a mindset that's going to invite that. And
yeah.
so yeah, so more, can we talk a little bit further about introversion challenges, and then what works in an environment for you, and are people seeing that at home now?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what you've said there. Again, it's not just going to be introversion, extroversion. There's different needs for each person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the least there is more space to have a conversation with your boss, with HR about some challenges you might be having,
Mm-hmm.
and how you want to work.
Yeah.
And then I think the second piece is, and this is something that I talk about when I'm speaking to leaders,
Mm.
is you can get a lot more out of your employees if you foster this. It's not just a cost. It's not just, yeah, now it's 2020. We have to do all these extra things for people because everyone's delicate. It's not
It's just
the
been
case.
missing. It's a
Yeah.
I think it's a level of complexity, and also I think there's been a sort of a foundation. If we were coming from the factory environment and we brought people in to do work, and we sort of treated like people are in a factory, a mental factory, but we're not. And so I talk about respecting humanity because we're animals. And so if we're going to think about incubating and creating an environment which each one can perform, I mean, I have 2 cats, they're outside. Those 2 cats are wired differently. I have to treat them differently. I have to understand how they operate. Well, we
Mm,
all have those differences. And so it's just been a blatant missing in a striving for equality, because it's simpler to articulate policy if we're trying to treat everybody the same.
yeah.
It's more complex, it's messier, and we have to step into a mindset that says, I'm after equity. I'm after making sure everybody here can perform to their best, which means they need different things. So as employees, we have to open our mindset to say, oh, if I look left and I look right, that person might have a standing desk because they need it. This person might be able to work from home 4 days a week because they need it to perform.
Yep.
So how do we redesign this? And how do we get leadership in a place where we're going to have the discussion and in-depth thinking and openness of mindset to tackle collaboration and all of those ways that we need to connect in a different way. It's a radical workplace redesign opportunity that I think has been fast-tracked years, if not decades, into, wow, we've had to face it in 6 weeks, six
Yeah.
months, right? So yeah, so I think we're on the cusp of a phenomenal opportunity. So so in relationship to those challenges and what we're seeing, what would you say to leaders now to think about when they're thinking about how do I support this population? 30% of my workforce is introverted. They're not thriving in this open concept office, just because it was economical
Mm.
to reduce the footprint. Um, how are we going to keep those people contributing?
Yeah, yeah. I've heard the quote is probably getting a bit old now, but never waste a good crisis. Yeah, so we've had proof of concept
Yeah,
thrust upon us
yeah.
about work from home. Like I know people that their workplaces kind of mouthed, yeah, we're looking at work from home options, especially for parents, like some splits of maybe a couple of days here
Mm.
or there. But it was really just lip service. Uh, then we had this completely thrust upon us, and some people are more productive, which is crazy because we're all under this amazingly extra layer of stress. So anyone who can be more productive right now, either their workplace was absolutely dragging them down, or they're super people.
Yeah, there's some
So
research. I just want to
yeah,
echo that point. There's some research that just came out that says 30% of people right now are less productive at home. But I would add that it's harder to be productive at home than ever because everybody's there. So if it's only 30% being less productive, that's pretty impressive. It means that 70% are at least or more productive.
mm,
It's so I just want to put on the table that the research is also showing 41% of people definitely want to get back to the office. So I there's a need for both environments, and
yeah,
there's a need for in the invitation that if we're hiring somebody for their ability to think, we need to make sure we're creating the environment or allowing them to create the environment in which they can really think. And so what does that look like? So yeah, sorry to interrupt there, but the
no.
research is supporting what you're saying.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, and another big change that we're going to have thrust upon us is the open office concept. It can't function while we're still doing distancing as
Yeah,
people go back to work. So
yeah.
all the introverts that have been told they've got to go back to work are just quietly cheering because it's like I might get an office or at least a cubicle where I'm not staring at someone constantly. Yeah, and it could be the same with your example about highly sensitive people is
Mhm,
yeah, if you're watching all that activity going on in the office and
mhm,
it's just a drain on the battery in the
mhm.
background the whole time. So yeah, so we're going to have some changes thrust upon us. I've really enjoyed the research that is called the open office concept, the stupidest management trend of the last century.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and there are still yeah, no one's saying that yeah, if you suddenly identify as an introvert, you get to live in a cave and never interact with people and still get paid to do
Exactly.
your
Yeah.
job. There's still collaboration, but going back to your point about how can leaders help facilitate people to work to their personalities and
Mhm.
and and be more successful. So an introvert, for example, might not thrive if you just throw everybody into a boardroom for a day and let everybody, brainstorm. And
Mhm.
yeah, the research on brainstorming is that pretty much the two loudest people in the room, their ideas are the ones that go up and groupthink happens. Where introverts have found more success with collaborating is perhaps starting in that group setting, working out what we want to do, going away, processing it, using the strengths. An introvert, one of the strengths we have is focus and the ability to think at depth. And that's why that open office and the constant interruptions is a bit of a killer. But they've found that that is far more effective for them to go back and then maybe touch base with one person, like swap this idea because what that person their expertise is, or they might have some ideas, and come back at the end. It's a different concept of collaboration, but nothing wrong with doing it in that manner. And that's possible while we're working from home as well. Rather than, okay, I have 18 Zoom meetings today because work wants to keep an eye on me, make sure that team spirit is up, all the different reasons. But maybe you can have a conversation with your boss and say, look, I don't feel like I'm getting anything done in these meetings. I do need to work with others. Can I just call Shelley and we can work this out between the two of us, and if I need additional support, I'll reach out, or we can touch back at tomorrow's meeting. So there are some different ways, but a lot of it is just, first of all, you got to know how you're wired and how you work best. Then you can have the conversation, because one of the other more overall work trends that I feel has been coming for a long time is going to more of a results-based economy, instead of you need to clock 40 hours to get paid this. And I feel like a lot of workplaces, even though they're paying people hourly and they need to be there, they're really just averaging out what an hourly rate is fair for the amount of money that person makes the company. So a salesperson that is less incentive based and more hourly based, are they just being paid to turn up, or would it be more effective to get someone who only works 20 hours but knocks it out of the park?
You're right. It's the results only work environment that we need to look at what the metrics are. It's interesting because my story is I actually left the corporate world because I wasn't permitted to work from home part-time, and my kids were small. They were 3 and 5, and that battery drained before I got home every day. It was sub empty, and when it's sub empty, then you're getting consequences that can have long-term disastrous effects, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I had to make a decision, and it was, I can't sustain this work construct. And so it was interesting to me because I was curious, what was it that leadership saw that was so important to have me in the office? And what I learned, and I was told by my leader at the time, and then her superiors subsequent to that, was that it was actually a desire for a leadership, a mentorship, a peer-to-peer influence that you would have from being physically in the office. And so it's interesting when you mentioned introversion, perhaps not wanting to be in those big group meetings. So it's an interesting one, because how do introverts then exact their influence? How do they show their leadership? And actually, let's dive into the temperament and how it shows up in leadership. Is it still that 30-70 kind of introversion or non-introversion split, or what does it look like in leadership? And then how does that transcend into how we show up and progress through our careers?
The numbers are going to be a little bit lower, because the term extrovert bias, it doesn't mean that it's an on purpose action, but basically what we recognize as leadership traits are people that speak up, people that really push themselves. One thing that affected me, and I know many introverts, we really don't like pushing ourselves on people. A colleague used it as request. What was it? Request. It was basically you didn't want to ask things of people, but also we're not very good at pushing ourselves. So you say you say personal professional branding to an introvert, and they'll just go, like, I don't want to brag. I'm humble. Yeah. So
I don't want the spotlight. either? Is that part of it?
Spotlight's one piece, but I think another one is introverts really struggle to talk themselves up or to push their case, whereas an extrovert really has less of an issue with pushing themselves, especially when we're talking about things that would lead to promotions, asking for things, it is a problem that I see a lot of introverts talk about is being overlooked and not wanting to ask. Unfortunately, there comes a point where you need to be able to ask. We're in a reasonable situation with, even though everybody probably hates the end of year report and the talk with your manager and setting goals and things like that. If you look at it in the right respect, that is an opportunity to actually lay out where you want to go and have those conversations. So some of it could just be more mindset than anything. But yeah, that reluctance to put yourself forward means that that less introverts will get into those leadership roles. Some introverts just never want to manage people, and they're completely happy being a worker bee as opposed to a manager, and that can be fine because you can have a huge impact if you're excellent at your job.
Individual contributors as they move up. That's sort of what I saw, people who are choosing not to lead teams and still make really significant contributions.
Yeah. So the numbers would be a little bit down, but yeah, you'd also be amazed that some of the best CEOs in the world are introverts. Warren Buffett, Obama was an introvert.
He had his whole, I just read Becoming, and it wasn't the home away from home, it was the whole away from home. I think he had a very very cerebral, very quiet, a lot of book reading, a lot of alone time, a thinker.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was reflected in what a great speaker he was. That's how he made an impact. It wasn't getting emotional and going crazy on TV. It was he impacted. Maybe he didn't impact as much as some of the other presidents at the time, but his words echoed on longer. The sound bites he gave and the way he got people thinking, whether you like him or not. I'm purely coming at it as was he a good leader? Was he impactful? But a lot of CEOs, especially because the tech world has had such a massive impact. So you see all these CEOs that were pretty quiet people. But actually, one of the funny ones is Bill Gates is not an introvert, and that's probably the biggest misconception. He's often quoted as the example of like an introverted leader. He's not. He's not again, I'll use that term. He's not a raging extrovert. Like he's still a kind
of like Richard Branson, I would say, is clearly extroverted.
Absolutely. Like Bill Gates. He wasn't afraid to deal with people or anything like that. He'd just rather code. He'd just rather work. But he's a good example of just because you wear glasses and you work on a computer doesn't mean you're an introvert if you become a CEO. And the other thing as well is that some powerful introverts, again, they're not shy. Introversion is more about where that energy comes from and that kind of thing. They just so it's not about being shy or nervous or worrying about what everybody thinks.
What about the perception that, and this might relate more to shyness, but I would think it could relate to introversion as well, the sense of appearing aloof and disinterested.
It's something I think about every time I have to get on a video screen because I have resting serious face, so I got to remember to dial it up by about 300%. And
I have nervous smile face, which just happened to be a lucky thing. If I'm nervous, you're just going to think I'm happy. So
I need a shot of that because my thinking face is. It's almost like culture when someone goes to Japan and is speaking and the guys in the front row have their eyes closed and someone would think, they're like I'm boring them, and it's like, no, that's a respect. Like they're closing their eyes so they can really take in what what you're saying. So
Sometimes, having lived in Japan for almost 3 years, sometimes they're
wow,
also
yeah.
really fantastic at sleeping on a dime. Like really, really, really good. So
But that's an example. But like
yeah,
even as a speaker, especially when I was first getting started,
yeah.
you've always got that person in the audience that just arms crossed, just the stink face, and
Yeah.
you can't stop looking at them. You're trying to find the friendly people around them.
That's me. I'm the
But
smiler in the audience going, I know what it's like to be up there, not getting anything back from the audience. So how helpful is it to just like land some smiles, right? Just nail them to the speaker, right?
yeah, but the
Yeah.
amount of times I've had that person that I thought, "Okay, did I run over your dog in the parking lot? What happened?"
Right.
They're the ones that come up
Right.
to me and say, "That was a really good talk. Like I got so much out of it." And I'm like, "Are you
And it
sure?
fooled
Are
me.
you
Yeah.
sure? Because you did not look like you're enjoying it."
That's good to note, actually. So as a speaker, I think it's helpful to find the eyes that are giving you something back. But you're right, not to assume that your content isn't landing, that your information isn't really being processed without an external validation of that.
Yeah, and then to take that back to the workplace, whether it's
Mm,
leadership or just in general, it's not the rest of the world's job to go, oh, introverts are like this. This is how, like, we just have to, be aware and put up with it. As an introvert, you need to understand that people may think that you're giving them nothing, so you might need to dial it up a little bit.
mhm.
You might need to find that friendly person in the meeting that helps you get in, because yeah, especially when I worked in oil and gas in Calgary, and I was in communications, and I'd get on these committees where everyone was meeting. I'm more quiet. I was pretty new to the industry. I talk funny, so I wasn't feeling like I was walking in and just owning the room. And there was a lot of people that were like 30-year plus people, so I would absolutely get within 10 minutes of the meeting ending and go, I haven't said a single thing,
Mm.
especially one where everyone's jumping in and throwing ideas around.
So
And it was
what do you do now? What do you do to drive your participation?
well, I found personally, it got worse and worse the longer I didn't speak,
Mm.
the more self-conscious I got about it, and I overthink like
Somebody's timing me and it's
yeah,
climbing and
yeah,
it's
like
everywhere.
an introvert
Yeah.
superpower that we don't want is overthinking and constantly questioning
Mm.
everything. So to get around that, I needed to speak up early and get myself in the game. One thing I did, I went to an industry association, and I was very quiet in it. So
Mm.
I'm good at organizing things. I like organizing social events and things like that. I'm a bit of a dork with all the logistical things. So I joined the leadership team, and I started running the meetings. And so
So
and I was
you
I
put
was
yourself
fine.
into where you couldn't avoid it. You
Yeah, well, I was
yeah,
fine standing up and introducing a speaker. I
right,
was always a pretty good communicator, just
right.
just with the weirdness of like, but I'm reserved and I miss my chance to speak, or
Mhm.
or I always have the default of letting someone else talk first, which is not a great way to stand out in a workplace or a similar situation. So so you can do that. Another important thing to do is prep, because if you're not as wired to throw ideas back and forth,
Mm.
find out what's going to be happening in that meeting, get the agenda, talk to your
Mhm.
boss and say, so what are we going to be talking about, and come there with ideas. Like, use that power of deep thought and focus to prep before, so you can come and really
Ah.
make an impact.
I
And
love
again,
that. I love that. So it's detaching putting your mind to work in the environment that works for you. So then you can be effective in that rapid fire. I love that rapid fire conversation and it spurs my brain. My challenge is to not interrupt people. You might have noticed that. So,
no, but I can get like that as well. If I'm comfortable with someone and I'm really into a subject,
mm-hmm.
I had to pull myself back on that, because I found that I was doing it a lot at a certain point in time, and I realized what I was doing was I was trying to agree with them. I was trying to make them feel like I really heard their idea, but what I was doing was I was still interrupting. So I had to
Oh, yeah.
find different ways to do that. And you never know where a conversation's going to go if you actually shut up and let people finish what they're going to say.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I can interrupt people that I'm socially that I'm really close to, because
Yeah.
we're having fun going back and forth. And you would find if you got really close to an introvert and you're talking on a passion subject, you might
Yeah.
not be able to shut them up. Like, an introvert can
And
talk.
you never saw it coming. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Interesting.
we've got to get warmed up, but it's also, that's probably going to be more of a one-on-one, and it's going to be someone that they know really really well, as opposed to the person really far on the extroverted side
Yeah.
can just walk into a room and chat to everybody and anyone, and think what a great day. Like, that was a big challenge with networking for me. I had to pull back and stop worrying about like how many people I spoke to, or
Mm.
how many business cards I got, and I cut myself some slack. But I changed my goals to, if I get in a conversation where I can help someone, I can add some value to someone, then I'm done. If I want to stay, cool, but like, that was my limit. And it wasn't about getting something for me. It was like, if I have a conversation where I can give someone some advice because of my expertise, or I can introduce them to someone that would help them, or
Mm.
even just actually listen to someone and make them feel heard, then I was like, okay, I can go. And often I
Yeah.
didn't.
It's winning. Yeah.
Yeah, often I
Yeah.
didn't leave, because I was managing my energy and managing what works for me. It doesn't mean that
Hmm.
I still wasn't a bit awkward in the first 5-10 minutes when I get in there, and
Hmm.
I would go find the same people that I knew, and they were my warm-up people. And subsequently I've realized that there were a few people that were introverts as well that would do that as well. They would warm up. It's just you just can't talk to them all night. You've got to actually
So it
break away.
requires this self-awareness piece, and then it requires a little bit of bravery, it sounds like, and commitment to doing those things. I call it dancing in discomfort, that you know will be uncomfortable because it's going to get you to where you want to go. So interjecting yourself into a meeting,
Yeah.
by preparing in advance. I know I was listening to a friend of mine. She's the chief people officer for Thought Exchange, and they had a fabulous. I'll put a link to it. Had a fabulous webinar and Thought Exchange where they're gathering people's feedback around onboarding. And I can imagine, especially in onboarding, if you're introverted, it's pretty hard to connect. So there were lots of valuable suggestions in there. I'm wondering if with people working from home, really out of sight, out of mind, interjecting yourself in a meeting that's great. What else can introverts do to be upholding and growing their relationships and staying, keeping those connections very meaningful and not being forgotten at home?
Yeah. Yeah, but so if your strengths aren't, and everybody's struggling in Zoom meetings or video conferencing meetings, the data that's starting to come out, I'm just scripting out a video on like the introvert survival guide on for Zoom.
Oh,
But
that's brilliant. Yeah. Let me
but
know when it's out. I'll share it out.
yeah, absolutely. But everyone's struggling because of the lag sometimes, and everybody the well, Bob, oh, no, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Like, everyone's getting tired because your brain is working much harder to try to get all the in-person cues that you used to get in a sit-down meeting. One of the suggestions they're saying is just turn it into a voice call. Like, you'll be able to pick up more in their voice if you're not taxing yourself
Mm.
on
Yeah.
Zoom.
One
So
thing I've suggested with my audiences is that, and clients, is if you're in a call and you've got a little bit of exhaustion around showing up on video, and not only having to look at it, but be also this feeling of being watched all the
yeah,
time. I recommend the first 5 minutes, everybody join, because there are people, the extroverts need to see you.
yeah, yeah,
And it's also good for you to maintain your presence and to be thought of. Then if you need to go dark, go dark. And then when you've got something to say, turning your video back on is a really good cue, rather, than waving frantically or putting something in chat, hoping it's missed. Turning your video back on, it was all of a sudden is a visual cue. You have something to say, but
mm,
it allows, and if we can have great facilitation from a leadership perspective, we'll invite that so
yeah.
that our introverts and extroverts both will feel comfortable, and they'll have an equal opportunity to share their perspectives.
Yeah, yeah, and moving into some ideas about how an introvert can stay plugged in. Well, can you do more one-on-one calls? Like, can you, whether it's your boss or whether it's collaborating
Mm,
with other people,
mm,
while everybody's struggling, like how could you build better relationships by helping people out that like you don't actually have any skin in the game? Like
mm,
it's not necessarily going to get you a promotion to help out, Claire on something she's working on, but maybe I have something to add, because what I found, like, especially, like, I don't mind getting on a social call, especially really early on in all of this COVID uh, you know situation. I didn't mind getting on a few calls, but I also am pretty good at looking after my own boundaries.
mm,
So I don't think I got as taxed, and I was more than happy to A, say no to things, or B, if I was sick of a call and maybe I felt a bit awkward about interrupting and telling everyone goodbye, just like, whoop, my Wi-Fi dropped off the call, like, big deal. Like, I'm just talking about social calls, like it wasn't a
yeah,
big
yeah.
deal. But yeah, so can you do a bit of one-on-one work? One thing that introverts are pretty good at is they, we're obviously thought of as good listeners,
Mm,
probably because we don't speak. But yeah, if you pick something up in a meeting and things just go flying past and they can't be, like, you can't bring it back. Well, can you either talk to the person that's leading that project or your boss and say, hey, have we looked at things like this? Because groupthink is going to happen on these calls. Again, it seems like the stats are always that two people are dominating everything.
mm,
So can we get away from that? And then, yep. So can we look at it like that? Can you step back and use that focus to maybe work through problems and then come to people? So you might be able to actually head off some video conferencing meetings if you can come up with good ideas and initiate the conversations with
mm.
people before someone says, well, we better have a meeting. It's like, no, we can do this in an email, actually, or
Or a
Claire and I
phone
can
call. Hmm.
Claire and I can let Claire and I handle this and report back to the group.
So
Yeah, so
proactively heading off a meeting that might not need to happen, and everyone will thank you for that. So,
yeah, like,
yeah,
introvert and extrovert alike will
yeah,
thank you at the moment, because it's so
yeah,
overwhelming. Like, everyone is overwhelmed by the amount of calls and things like that. And on the
yeah.
flip side, if you're a leader, if you're running those meetings,
Mm,
uh, if you can recognize that someone isn't necessarily contributing, but you know what their strengths are, can you call on them? And as an introvert as well, as you could say to your boss, just call it out. Say, hey, I really struggle to interrupt people. It's just
mm.
it's just how I'm wired. I'm struggling with this. I have something to speak to. Can you call on me when we get to this point? Or I
Oh,
know.
that's yeah,
Yeah, or
yeah.
can you use the chat feature? Imagine sitting in a live meeting and actually having a chat feature where you could, you'd basically be texting your boss going, "Hey boss, like, can we look at this?" So I don't know, maybe some people never look at the chat, but it's
That's a tricky one to do because I
yeah.
know I can see over because I can see my screen on Facebook. There are several people that have joined us. I don't see any questions there yet. So if you are on Facebook and you have a question, now's a great time to put one in the chat for me, because I will make a dedicated effort to look for questions there before we wrap up our conversation. But I to pay attention to what you're saying, think about what I want to say next, and actually look. I'm miserable at that kind of multitasking, and then I might lose where I'm, what I was really intending to hold on to. So
Yeah, like,
we're asking a lot. We could be asking a lot from the brain to be
yeah.
able to do all that.
Yeah, but in a regular meeting, if your boss is
Yeah.
no good at doing that, you say, "Hey, boss, can I monitor the chat? Like, if people are,
Yes. Oh my
can
gosh.
can can I be
Yeah.
that person?" And then, whatever it is, if you have to, like, wave at the boss when something has cropped up, so I mean, if there's a lack of resources for you to do something, is there a way for you to step into the breach without
I love that. I love it. Yeah, there are a lot of ways for introverts to find a comfortable voice and way of participating now, and particularly in this place. We've talked a lot about introverts. and I know you look at this very holistically. What can you tell me about how extroverts are, how are they struggling now with work from home? And do you have any suggestions for that population?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I guess the thing that I've picked up that we touched on before is even the extroverts are struggling with the overwhelm. I'm on too many calls. There's the Zoom thing is exhausting me.
Mm-hmm.
But for either group, it comes back to drawing boundaries. So yeah, if you're not getting enough social contact and you're not getting enough sort of exposure to other people's ideas, well, can you go outside of whatever the structure is? Okay, we just have one meeting a day, but I'm not getting enough feedback. I need to talk to someone. Well, are there some other extroverts that you could bounce ideas off? Yeah, like,
Actually, it brings to mind something that Deselin said on the call that I watched yesterday. And at Thought Exchange, they have an open calendar policy, which means that you can see, of course, you can block off what you want to protect, but everybody's calendar is open in public, and they have, and it's especially important for a geographically diversified workforce,
mm,
an invitation that you can drop in, or you could ask to attend any meeting. So for onboarding and getting a feeling of culture, that's fantastic. But it could also be feeding a need for extroversion and connection, that you can drop in on somebody else's team meeting because you can understand and connect with a whole group of people. Just getting that sense of energy from all the people in the room. So I thought
yeah,
that was
yeah,
a really cool,
yeah,
and I hadn't
yeah.
thought of that way of
Yeah. One
interacting.
other thing I think again, it's a fairly generalized problem. So I've saw some interesting information about the reliance on email is even greater. Like people are firing emails, but
Mhm.
without the ability to walk down the hall to to someone's office and clarify it. That rule of like if you've emailed back and forth 3 times, get up and go talk to them, kind of thing. I think that still applies even though we're distant. So
Oh,
for
yeah.
extroverts, maybe they're like firing off a lot of emails to people, and they might feel like they're not getting the response back. Well,
Hmm.
maybe you need to change it. Maybe it's a quick call just to give the context, because what I was reading is yeah, the communication right now is lacking the context, and so you need to add that into your emails. Why am I
Yeah.
emailing you? Not just, hey, Bob, can you give me blah, 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 blah. Well, you're asking Bob to take time out of his day, but why?
Mhm.
So if you're in a workplace, that context might be a bit more clear, because you might have talked to Bob in the hallway as you were leaving a meeting, or something along those lines.
Yeah,
So,
I
um,
will say, yeah, exactly that. And that this whole experience that we're in is actually asking more patience of us, because we have to be more intentional, specifically around communication, whether we're in a lineup and somebody's not wearing a mask and we want them to be, or whether we are, trying to give as much information as we can, context, if you will,
yeah,
to and complexity, sensitivity as well. So all of those things, there's a continuum of information that we provide when we're communicating, and you or I are on the richest form right now with video,
mm,
because and if we're back further, we'll see even more body language. So going more quickly to those more complex methods of communication, so you get timbre of voice. I just recently sent someone an email, and normally it would have been just email, and I'm like, I sent you a voicemail, please listen, because there are things that I want, tone of voice really matters. And so
yeah,
if we can encourage that patience and thought, and recognize that we might choose to get less done but better now, I think it's really important to hold on to that as we communicate. So yeah, I'm
yeah,
glad you raised that point. We have
yeah.
literally 4 minutes left before 1 o'clock. I just don't see any calls, any questions coming up. So last chance to my Facebook, beloved Facebook people, if you've got something that you'd like to ask Dave or I, put it in the comments and I will be able to see it before we wrap. But I wanted to just come back. I'm just checking my list of questions for you. Um, Oh yeah, I'm gonna ask this one. We're, some people are looking now about going back into the office, and we talked a little bit about physical design and cubicles maybe coming back, or some divisions. What else should we be asking for a leadership for to better accommodate this diversity between temperament, introversion, extroversion, sensitive, neurodiversity, all of that? What should we be asking leaders for in the customization of work from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we've probably talked about it in bits and pieces here, but I think a good part of it is also working out how you best work. So do you need big blocks of time? Would an office help? Would changing some roles and responsibilities really suit you? Like, are you forced to do some people-facing work that just doesn't work for you and doesn't really make sense? But Claire, who's more extroverted and who is stuck doing some research work that doesn't really suit her personality, is there a way to re-examine some of the roles and responsibilities?
That's a good point. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
The key thing I would do is I would tie it back to results. I would not tie it back to some sort of HR thing, whereas I need this magical setup that no one else has. I would tie it back in to, I can get better results. I can do more for the team. I can work more successfully in this way. So and it's not just, wouldn't just restrict it to leadership. Like I had to have some conversations with a couple of people about how I worked and why I wanted my office door closed. And it was almost like doing the work from home when you got to put up a sign to your kids to like say, you cannot disturb me right now.
Not unless you're bleeding, is what I told my kids. Not unless you're bleeding. You don't get to interrupt me.
I have a nice stencil drawn recording sign on the door that the kids know, get off the Wi-Fi and don't come down into this area. But like it's also a conversation with other people. It's like if my door is mainly shut but it's cracked open, come in. It's just I don't want a conversation with everybody who blows past my door. So it again can be you're able to address it as well, because again when that battery gets drained, people again, they might think that you're aloof, you don't like people or something like that. But if you can explain to people, it's like, man, by 3 o'clock I'm drained. I'm just hammering out the work I've got to do. So can we do our talking at this time or this time? So it's not just waiting for leaders to have this epiphany and go, we must.
No, it's about asking for what you identify that you need. And I think, if leaders can meet that with a curious mind, collaborative, compassionate mindset to say, okay, let's experiment and let's look for those results. Because and not to dismiss that collaboration is important. How do we get at that? How do we get that at those other objectives, which are really important about interaction, and make sure that happens? Well, Dave, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I'd like to let everyone know that they can find more out about you and what you do at the Introverted Networker.com. So please check Dave Byrnes out there. This was a rich conversation. I learned a lot more about introversion as a temperament, as a strength, as a superpower, what that segment of our population has to offer, and how better to support them. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope it wasn't too exhausting.
This has been a lot of fun. Again, I'm one-on-one. I can't see the Facebook people, so not exhausting at all. It was a really interesting conversation. I appreciate it, Claire.
Thanks so much. Have an awesome day.